So billionaire Ken Griffin just dropped a massive bombshell about Tesla and Elon Musk, something you have never heard before. Also, we have a shocking decision coming out of the court in Delaware about said Elon Musk and Tesla, which has blown everybody's mind. Also, we have Chinese stock at a 5-year low and Evergrande getting liquidated. A lot of macro pressures in China coming close to an end. Also, we have earnings from Microsoft, Google, and AMD. A lot of interesting things came out of these earnings, and the Fed's rate decision is today. We'll talk about all of that. But first of all, we have to give out today's MVP award. And today's MVP award, as always, is sponsored by Stock MVP, your research tool for smart long-term investing in the stock market. Today's MVP is the founder and the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp.
The reaction of anti-Israel protesters and organizations and countries bringing absurd claims. There is no other world power that, including what I view as almost the holy country of America, that would react any other way but worse to these situations. That's just a baseline fact. The logical reaction to being held by a completely different standard, the logical reaction would be like, screw it. Why should we have a standard at all? There are a lot of people, again, the most functional parts of the world, again, places I've not been aligned with are like, yes, but we need societies and institutions to work, not work in the theory of some academic playbook run by people who've literally destroyed everything they've touched, but by people who've done things that are very hard under the harshest conditions. And so that's what I thought.
Now, honestly, I don't know how this man walks around with balls of steel. They must weigh so much, but this guy absolutely cares 0% what others think of him. He says exactly what he thinks, and he calls it like he sees it. In fact, I'm sure a lot of people in mainstream media, a lot of people in the industry share his opinions, but they're too afraid to talk about it. Shout out to Alex Karp for giving literally zero fricks about what other people think about him and saying the truth, calling it like he sees it. Now, let's move on to Ken Griffin, the billionaire from Citadel who talked about Tesla, at least tried to talk about Tesla, and got cut off immediately. But before he got cut off by the interviewers, he managed to say a lot of important things in just a few seconds. Check it out.
U.S. companies, your Fords and GMs, are still trying to catch up with Tesla. And Tesla has one great asset. Elon is a phenomenal entrepreneur. And I think that don't lose sight of the fact that Tesla makes a great car, but there's an opportunity at Tesla to create the software platform for the future of automobiles. The self-driving car, good chance will first happen at Tesla.
Now, he didn't waste a lot of time, and in a short time frame, he talked about this. He actually talked about 3 important points I want to put out in this video today. Now, these points are that the big 3 in the United States, the Ford, the GMs, the Stellantis, they're all still haven't caught up with Tesla. They're light years behind, and the pace at which they're running is significantly slower than the pace of Tesla. When somebody is miles ahead, and they're running faster, and they're increasing speed, while you're running significantly slower and you're slowing down, you're not going to win this race. Essentially, what he was alluding to, even though he didn't want to outright say it, is that Ford and GM in their current constellation, construction, whatever you want to call it, organization, they're finished. They're going to have to come up with some sort of a way to maybe reorganize their business, maybe combine it, maybe merge, because in the current constellation of Ford and GM, they cannot compete with Tesla. He was literally telling you gently that this is the end of Ford and GM and Stellantis the way we know it. Now, Stellantis still has a lot of brands in Europe that's going to keep it afloat, but for Ford and GM, the geographic concentration in the US market and the lack of ability to compete with Tesla is a whole different story. So check out how little of words were wasted to make this really important point. He then also said that the most important secret weapon of Tesla is Elon Musk. The guy who everybody loves to hate on, especially in mainstream media, especially in the courts of law in Delaware, the most hated person on the earth. This guy is a billionaire. He literally has no skin in this game. And he's telling you, this is the secret weapon. This is the secret sauce. This guy. And I agree with him 100%. Look, at the end of the day, we're talking about a guy who gave shareholders a 15,000% return on their equity since Tesla went public. I don't know a lot of companies that did that. I don't know a lot of CEOs that did that. And in fact, right now, as we speak, Tesla is sitting literally on 5 or 6 different S-curves. It literally can pick which ones they want to take next. We've never seen a company like this before. We've never seen a CEO like this before. And the crazy part about us, this wasn't even the most important point Ken Griffin made, because then he went ahead and actually said something absolutely brilliant, which is that Tesla will most likely become the only provider of autonomous driving. The same thing Ron Barron told you months ago. The same thing that the Tesla community have been telling you for years. There's nobody else in the game. There's no real competitors that are competing with Tesla about autonomous driving. If autonomous driving isn't possible, that's the only way in which Tesla doesn't monopolize this market. But if humanity manages to get to autonomous driving, to level 4, Tesla is going to be the company to do that. There's not going to be a second or a third. They're essentially going to quasi-monopolize this market, which means their technology is going to be in every single vehicle in the market that wants to have monopolist. Yeah, sure. Monopolist driving. Sure. Autonomous driving. And you know how much money we're talking about here? This is a software business. This is 80% margin. But Ken is telling you, hey, the cars are great, but think about the next thing. Think about the software. They're literally writing code that nobody else will have and will become standard in the auto industry. And they're the only ones who are going to have it. Now, shout out to Ken Griffin. He might be my next MVP. We'll see about that, although Grandpa is kind of a close second here. Now, look, Elon Musk just got absolutely wrecked by the court in Delaware by the same judge who actually made him buy Twitter, now X. So she just voided his $56 billion compensation package from 2018. Now, let's talk about it. Now, it took the judge 200 pages to explain that this payment plan was unfair. I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. The legitimate argument that was made here is that the compensation package was unfair. 200 pages to tell you that she didn't like the fact that this guy was getting paid $56 billion. Now, honestly, this might be one of the most commonest decisions we've ever seen from a US court of law, and I hope Tesla appeals this, although I don't think so, and I'll tell you in a second why. There's an easy way to work around this stupidity. But look, you have to understand the package here that he got. And by the way, I'm not talking about the big package. That's Alex Karp with his steel balls. This guy got a $56 billion package. Fine. But he never got cash. That's the whole point. This is performance-based equity. He only gets paid if the company goes wild, if the stock price goes crazy. Elon doesn't get paid in cash. He only gets paid if he gets the job done. That's the whole beauty of this package. We're talking about a guy who gave you 15,000% return from the IPO to this day. He literally did crazy things no other CEO has done in this industry. Sleeping on the factory floor, getting 17 divorces, 15,000 kids, God knows how many bad personal life choices, absolutely no work-life balance, no tan, overweightness, cage matches with Mark Zuckerberg, like craziness we've never seen before, just to give you this. And he never got paid without giving results. So yes, they might appeal this, although I don't think it's likely. I think it's more likely they go back and they re-vote it and they pass it in a way that technically matches something that the court of law cannot overthrow because it was unfair. They're going to go around the loopholes and going to give him a bigger package now because the company has been doing better than ever. So at the end of the day, and no offense to the court of law or the judge, but this decision was like a fart. It's very loud, it's very uncomfortable, noisy, embarrassing, but soon to be forgotten. Now let's talk about the Evergrande story. It's getting worse in China. So China is actually in a spiral, which is something we've been talking about for months. So the Chinese CSI 300, and no, that's not a TV show, actually slid to a 5-year low because the manufacturing activity shrank in China for the 4th straight month in January. On top of it, Evergrande, the largest property developer in China, is now being liquidated by the Hong Kong courts, which is a whole mess on its own. But basically, the Chinese government tried to prevent this for the past 2 years. They failed. The courts in Hong Kong are forcing the Chinese authority to liquidate Evergrande. They don't want to do that because it's going to cause a massive mayhem inside China. You have to understand that 60-70% of the entire private Chinese savings of normal people like you and I are in real estate. There's no other investments available for Chinese people. They're not allowed to invest like you and I. So these apartments, these 1 billion apartments that have never been lived in and will never be lived in, this whole ghost cities, ghost neighborhoods, ghost train stations, ghost city halls, all of this was a way for the Chinese people to invest their money. 70% of that money is now sitting in something that's essentially a Ponzi scheme. If Evergrande falls, it's going to start a domino effect that's going to crash 35% of the Chinese GDP. It's not going to be even about that. It's going to be about the fact that a lot of angry Chinese will take to the streets. And if you remember, about a year ago, we had the mortgage protests in China, which gave the Chinese regime a little taste of what can happen if this whole thing goes tits up. So basically, the choice of the Chinese government is really, really tough here. They can either break apart and liquidate Evergrande and actually comply with the court's orders, which is going to start a huge mess in China. It's going to be a civil uprising of unseen proportions, or they can ignore the Chinese court and absolutely do nothing and pump money and keep this company zombied and alive and preventing the big mess in China, but essentially voiding the entire court system and rule of law in Hong Kong, which is going to drive any sort of foreign investments that Hong Kong had. So both options are terrible. We're talking about a country with 35% of their GDP in this Ponzi scheme real estate market. And the problem is that they have such a huge demographic issue. So many elderly people, not enough working age people. There's no way for them to generate enough people to create demand for all this excess real estate to get themselves out of this mess. So it seems that this is kind of the beginning of the end of China as we know it. Now, Google, Microsoft, and AMD actually reported earnings, and this was a very interesting earnings season. So it was good, but not as good as certain people expected. I think some of these companies were kind of a victim of the insane expectations people have put on them. Look, Google and Microsoft actually beat revenue and earnings, but Google had disappointing ad revenue. They slightly missed, and YouTube underperformed. Now, I can see it on my end because I get ad revenue. I could have told you that in advance. Now, Google still had great results despite the YouTube and the ad revenue being down because of the fact that their cloud services grew by 26%, which was absolutely phenomenal. Now, Microsoft revenue from Azure, which is their cloud service, actually grew 30%. So you can see where the money is, where the growth is. It's in the cloud services. The same thing with AMD. AMD is now making money from the data centers. So the data center business for AMD grew 38%. You can see how the money flows from the old traditional business lines to the cloud services, and now in the case of AMD, to the data centers. Now, it seems like AMD is actually positioning itself quite nicely as the number 2 in this massive market behind Nvidia. But the good news are that Google and Microsoft ain't going nowhere, and if you are an AMD investor, you should be extra happy because this company just placed itself as the number 2 in a massively growing market. So good stuff. And of course, we have to talk about Federal Reserve Day. Today, we have an interest rate decision announcement, which is going to be a nothing burger. They're not going to change it. Everybody knows it. It's the worst kept secret in the industry. Inflation is slowing down. They still want to see where this thing is going. But the main thing that's slowing down inflation is gasoline. Gasoline is coming down because of cyclical effects, because of winter. That's not something that's going to be changed by interest rates. The one thing that they need is for the real estate prices to come down a little bit more and then inflation to come to 2%. But that's not going to happen before people start to move in the summer months. Now, if the Federal Reserve drops rate right now, sure, it's going to increase some transactional activity in the real estate market, but very minuscule because wintertime is just not that great. Instead, they can wait until the summertime, until the market actually has a lot of momentum both directions, and then drop rates and then see the real estate prices actually come down, which will bring inflation down towards the 2% towards the summer in the second half of 2024, which they can do without gambling on lowering rates right now before they know for sure. It's better to be safe than sorry. I absolutely agree with what they're doing here. And before I let you go, make sure you check out Stock MVP, stock-mvp.com. It's a platform built by retail investors like myself for retail investors like you. Research your stocks, understand them, understand the business lines, make your own DCF models, etc. And of course, if you'd like to become a better investor, you're more than welcome in my academy, Tom Nash Academy at Patreon, patreon.com/Tom Nash. I'll see you there. See you in the next one.